Welcome to the TMC Newsroom. My name's Rich Tehrani. Thanks for watching us today. We're at Cloud Expo 2011 in Manhattan. On our program is Bryan Semple. He's the CMO of vKernel, and his company makes capacity management solutions for virtualized environments. And Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me here.
So could you elaborate, please, on what your company does above and beyond what I just mentioned?
Sure. So as people are deploying private clouds, public clouds, they're most likely deploying that on virtualized infrastructure. You know, it used to be that we would take a single application, we'd go put it on a hardware server, and it would forever live there. Virtualization allows us to put multiple applications onto a single server. That's good because it increases the efficiency. You can put more VMs on a box, you can get more out of a particular box. But it's also bad in that those VMs now compete for CPU memory and storage. It's kind of like going back to the mainframe, right? We used to have this shared pool and all the applications ran on it. So vKernel, we make solutions that allow you to manage the capacity in that environment to both ensure you have the right amount of performance, but also make sure you spend the right amount of money from a cost standpoint in those environments.
So really a dashboard that allows management, analytics, performance analysis of your virtualized system so that you're just maximizing the efficiency of what you own, your hardware.
Yeah, you said it right there with the word analytics, because basically what it is these environments are already instrumented with lots and lots of data. And the challenge is to make sense of that data in an automated fashion so that the virtualization administrators can go take action based on that data. So we actually, at our heart, is we're a large analytics engine that mines this data, does sophisticated analytic analysis on it, and then gives actionable recommendations for the VM admins.
So for example, would it tell you that certain apps might be better off running on a different virtual machine and a different physical machine?
It will tell you, so the main use cases would be, so the first use case would be to kind of keep you out of trouble. So you got a bunch of VMs running on a server. How do you know that those VMs are running from a performance standpoint fine? How do you make sure they're not competing with each other for memory? So that's kind of the first use case. The second use case is to predict when you're going to run out of capacity for those environments.
Right.
Because if you think about it, if I've got an application running, I know how much CPU, memory, and storage it's consuming. I can make predictions on what that consumption will look like in the future. And I know the size of my physical environment. So I can map those two together and say, I'm going to run out of space here. The third use case is helping VM admins figure out where to place that next VM. So I need to go place a VM. Do I put it on this box? Do I put it on that box? Where do I have space? And then the next use case is to optimize, because when you talk to these cloud providers and VM administrators, what you find is if you're an application owner and you call me up and say, hey, I've got an application, I need you to deploy it. I say, well, what do you need? And you'll say, I need tons of memory, tons of storage, tons of CPUs, right?
Right.
Applications tend to get over-allocated, so that use case is to reclaim that space. And then the final use case is to provide the reporting and the chargeback for management. So management understands the cost of their environment, who's consuming the resources, and can make predictions on when they need to buy new hardware.
So if you do have a couple apps that are, or virtual machines that they have contention for the physical memory, you could theoretically move one and make the suggestion might be made, hey, take a look at this physical machine, it has excess memory, and you could just drop it over there.
Exactly, and the reality is hopefully we're going to predict ahead of time that you're running into a collision, 2 weeks in advance, a couple days in advance to give you time to go move it. If it's a real-time collision, we're going to alert you on that immediately, saying, hey, you've got a real-time collision here. And then we'll make that recommendation to make the move over to a different device.
So, if I'm watching this video, I'm trying to figure out, I'm moving to a virtualized environment, and I'm not a customer today. What would make me a potential customer of vKernel? How big do I need to be, or is it a number of servers, or a number of virtual machines, or physical machines?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a typical customer for us will have, at the low end, we'll have 50 to 100 VMs, and at the high end, we'll have 10,000 VMs. And what happens is, as the number of VMs in your environment starts to increase, it becomes too difficult to use just basic monitoring tools to figure out what's going on in the environment. And you have to put the analytics on the back end of it. And so typically you'll look at investing in a system like us once you have deployed and the VM count's starting to increase. The flip side to that would be there are service providers that go in as services and stand up virtualized environments for Fortune 500 customers. They would build us into the actual specification of the initial project design because they would use this to go manage the system on the back end.
So, do CIOs and CTOs and CFOs ask for some sort of ROI calculator in terms of deploying your solution so that they know that they're going to see a return in a certain amount of time? And I guess you're really playing the arbitrage game here of well, two things, right? There's a efficiency and productivity of making sure that your apps are running correctly, which could be massive hit in terms of earnings if you've got a web server that's running slowly and your customers aren't able to buy things. But let's put that aside for a moment. In terms of just the ROI of efficiently using that hardware, how does that play out if someone asks you questions like that in terms of ROI?
So we always sell on the basis of an ROI at the back end of it, a business case. And the business case gets made two ways. So one is performance-oriented business cases, what you said right there, which is how to keep me out of trouble. The second one is if you increase the number of VMs per server you're running, you start to reduce the amount of capital costs you have to go buy. And for larger environments, keeping capital costs under control is a huge issue. So that's how we can go justify that.
Okay, so what's next for your company?
Well, yesterday we just actually announced a 3.5 version of our vOperation suite. It has a lot of enhanced functionality, use cases, both to support cloud operators and service providers. It's got more advanced analytics in it for capacity planning. There is a deep well of problems that need to be mined in the capacity management space. At one end of the spectrum, you have very, very mature products where you're just kind of adding features and widgets to. There are still lots and lots of problems that need to go get solved, and the challenge is only going to get worse. And what's driving that is a couple factors. So one is, as people are moving to more sophisticated VM deployments, they're bringing more mission-critical applications online. Therefore, ensuring capacity for those is absolutely critical. The second component you have is Moore's Law. So Moore's Law is making servers more and more powerful, more and more CPU per server, more and more cores, more and more memory. So that starts to put questions out about, do you scale up environments, do you scale out environments, what's the optimal platform to go buy there? The third thing that's happening is, as companies have virtualized their environment more and more, let's say they're 70% virtualized. It used to be if I was the VP of infrastructure, I could come to work each day and I could say, I took those 10 physical servers and I put it into one physical server using VMware. I just consolidated my data center down and I was a hero, right?
Right.
So everyone got used to the VP of infrastructure being a hero. Well, the problem now is the low-hanging fruit of that is kind of gone.
Right.
So now it's, why you buy more servers? Because I thought we solved this problem. The only way around that is to increase the VM density. And so for the environments that are virtualized in a greater percentage of their 60, 70, 80%, the VPs of infrastructure are now starting to pay attention to the cost per VM and the density of VMs in the environment. And then finally, I'll say the capacity management problem set, as people get more and more into this and more sophisticated, just continues to get deeper for us. I mean, the most recent one I came up with was, actually the show yesterday, a guy's got a bunch of servers operating. He needs to move VMs between his particular servers, but he needs to be aware of, he's got licensing restrictions based on where he moves VMs. He wants to bring that type of stuff into the calculations so that he makes sure he doesn't trigger a licensing problem by putting a VM on a host where it's not licensed to be.
Right.
So capacity can also be CPU, memory, and storage. It can also have a licensing component to it.
So you could dramatically increase your costs if you don't watch that stuff, right?
This guy was telling me they almost had a multi-million-dollar problem with Microsoft, because of how they were deploying the VMs. So yes. Yep.
And that's one of the underreported areas of virtual machines and just dealing with virtualization and the different policies of just how applications are licensed, and also now with the cloud, is it per user, is it per instance? I mean, there's a level of complexity here which, like you said, I mean, it's going to consume us for the next 10 years. Do
you run stuff on the cloud? Do you run it locally? Where's the best place? Do you have capacity on your cloud? Do you have there's all kinds of, the dynamic nature of the VM environment. If you contrast that to where it used to be with standard distributed systems, I put an application on a distributed system and it sits there until really the hardware end of life, or until I refreshed it, right? Or unless I had a capacity problem, and that was really painful to move it. Now suddenly you got this environment where the VMs are moving around, they're going everywhere, they're starting, they're stopping. It's a very, very challenging situation.
Well, thanks for addressing it, and keep us posted on your progress. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me here. Thanks, Rich.
Take care.
Yep, take care.